welcome to the Throwback Thursday GMG review. Today we're taking a look at Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition, the rules. So this will coincide today with my Let's Play for Warhammer 40k that I filmed with Chris as part of our ongoing series of 40k through the ages. We've looked at Rogue Trader with the battle manual. We're on now to 2nd edition. And if you've watched the series up until now, you'll realize 40k tended to go through periods of massive expansion in the very beginning, where it was sort of heavily supported by White Dwarf, the magazine, and sort of like kind of ad hoc content. Tons of stuff piled on top of the original edition until you needed to carry around 1 million publications to play your army, the game, whatever. It kind of slimmed down through the battle manual, and then in 93, you had Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition. The first time there was a big box game for Warhammer 40,000. It was done in 3 separate rulebooks, as opposed to having one rulebook. You had core rules, you had the war gear, and you had the Codex Imperialis. And what's fascinating about this is the Codex Imperialis and the Codex Army Lists were actually the rules for every single miniature in the game at that point, for the most part. A few weird weapons, a few weird individuals, or like holdovers from being able to use fantasy stuff in the Warhammer 40,000 game were omitted. But for the most part, if you could play it in 40k, it was in here. All the factions, all 8 factions. Space Marines, Imperial Guard, the Imperial Agents, which were like the Inquisition, the Odysseus, Astra Telepathica, the Misthorum, and the Mechanicus, the Assassins. Then the Orcs, the Eldar, the Squats, Chaos, and Tyranids, which included Gene Stealer cults. All had their rules in here, and they were given a unit entry, and then finally they were also given an army list, and that was the Codex Army List, which is down here. So you can see Space Marines, Imperial Guard, Imperial Agents, Squats, Orcs, Eldar, Chaos, Tyranids, and Gene Stealer cults. These were later on supported by codexes, and we'll get to that in 2 weeks for a separate review. But for right now, let's just jump in and take a look at the first book, which is the rules. Now, Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition played at, so I went to the Grand Tournament in 97. It was one of the, I think it was the final Grand Tournament actually for Warhammer 40,000 in that generation of the rules before 3rd edition launched in 98, in October 98. So that was kind of the peak of what the game turned into. And we played about 1,500 points. That was the game size. Which typically for a Space Marine army would be between 20 and 30 models. For a Imperial Guard army, it could be between 30 and 40. For Tyranids, even 30 to 40. Orcs, 40 to 50 maybe at the outside. So a very similar, probably a lower model count size than you saw today. But what the box came with was 20 Space Marine models, which is almost 1,000 points. That's a 600 point plus war gear unit. And if you took a Veteran Sergeant, the Chainsword, on each of them, the missile launcher and the flamer, you're looking at 345, 354, 364, 366. So a 732 point army, just out of the box. If you added a character, you were pretty much off the races and had a 1,000 point army, which was a good size, just 2 tactical squads and an HQ. And then you got 20 Space Orcs and 40 Gretchen. Which is a significant amount as well. At like 5 to 6 points each, you're looking at 250 points for the Orcs. The Gretchen were like 3 points each, so maybe 120 points for the Gretchen. You got significantly more Space Marine stuff in here. And so what they also gave you was a card Dreadnought. Ha-ha! So you had some big guns to go and fight with you. So they didn't give you an actual Dreadnought, they give you a card cutout of a Dreadnought. They gave you some assembled card ruins, and you'll actually see these used in our game. Some beautiful ruin miniatures that were punched out, painted, and prettied up by myself. You got your rule summary sheet. You got yourself a bunch of templates, including a Thud Gun template that you're supposed to put together with duotang little clips. And then you got some dice. So you got sustained fire dice, 10 ordinary d6s, a scatter dice, and an artillery dice. But it said, what else do you need? You probably need a set of D&D dice. So you need a standard 6 die set of RPG dice or polyhedral dice. So you need a D20, a D12, D10, D8, D6, and D4. Starting the game. Every game used its standard deployment. So this was relatively new. They said 6-foot board, 24-inch battle zone. You want a deployment zone that's basically 12 inches and 12 inches from the sides. We typically played on 4x4 boards, mostly to save table space, and also because at the time in Games Workshop stores, that's just what you played on, was a 4x4 board. A 1,000-point game on a 4x4 was fine. 1,500 on a 6x4. You didn't typically fill the board up. It was looking pretty barren. They had some standard deployment for your terrain, and then interestingly enough, this was a new thing, was strategy rating, deploying for battle. So you never rolled off for deployment. What you did was you used your strategy rating for your army, and this was a rule that basically represented how either smart or tactically minded your army is. Like the Tyranids, for instance, aren't necessarily dumb, but they act in ways that are kind of predictable typically, and they don't tend to think about laws. They don't strategize in a way that most people understand. They just throw biomass at problems. So they have a lower strategy rating of 1, whereas the Space Marines have a higher strategy rating of 5. Eldar sat at 4, Orcs and Chaos at 3, Imperial Guard and Squats at 2, and Tyranids at 1. And you would deploy in that order, including if you had allies. So if I had a Space Marine army with Imperial Guard allies and I was playing against Eldar, I had to put down all my Imperial Guard allies, then the Eldar player would deploy their army, then I would deploy the rest of my Space Marines. So there was an interesting back and forth with that. For going first, you would also dice off and add your strategy rating. So Space Marines had a huge advantage to going first against every other army, which was interesting. You almost always got the first shot. Typical victory points. Now, the mission cards were the next big thing in this game. The typical game length was 4 turns, but you could also randomly determine turn length at the beginning of the game. We just almost always played 4 turns. Everything was worth victory points on a standard chart, and then your mission cards, which are CSUs in the game, you'd shuffle them up and then have a secondary mission you were trying to accomplish in addition to killing your opponent. So the typical victory point table, and this was changed in Dark Millennium later on, is if it has a value of 100 points or less, it's 0 if it's 50% casualties, 1 if it's wiped out. If it's more than 100 points, it's a point if you get 50% casualties, and then another if you destroy it, and those are cumulative. So a unit that's over 100 points, basically, was worth 2 victory points if you killed it overall. If it was under 100, it was worth 1. Vehicles, same thing, just if it's worth 1 or more or less. And then enemy characters were worth 0 if wounded or 1 with killed, but I think on the cheat sheet, it actually said, oh, where's the other cheat sheet? I think on the other cheat sheet, it actually says different. Oh, it's not on this one, it's on the mission cheat sheet. I think that it has the same rules for characters, over under 100 points. If they're over 100 points, they're worth 1 or 1. I think it's actually just cropped out here. And then we have characteristics. This is pretty familiar, exactly the same as Rogue Trader. So movements, how far you move in inches, weapon skill ballistics go the same, strength and toughness are 3 and 4. Wounds are 1, initiative's 2, attacks 1, is all for an orc here, leadership 7. All of the mental stats from Rogue Trader get boiled into leadership in this edition. So there is no additional rules for intelligence or cool or willpower that kind of divided up jobs in the mental stats. They just got kind of streamlined and boiled down to leadership characteristic. Squad currency, 2 inches. Rules for cavalry. There was rules for dispersed formations with 4-inch deployment instead. So scouts had a dispersed formation. They had a 4-inch coherency instead of 2, which is kind of cool. And then your turn sequence. And again, this is going to look real familiar to the battle manual stuff. Move, shoot, hand-to-hand, psychic, and rally. Gone now is the reserves phase. Instead of making a move later on in the turn, you need to decide if you're running or not during the movement phase. Beautiful Jez Goodwin drawing of Lehman Russ here. And one of the greatest lines ever in a 40K book. Listen but closely, brothers, for my life's breath is all but spent. And the movement phase. Now here's where the 40K rules started to really imitate Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Even if you don't know that this is 40K, hearing this order of operations, declare charges, compulsory moves, move chargers, remaining moves, is a very fantasy terminology set, and actually stays in this game for the entirety of 2nd edition, but I think stays in Warhammer Fantasy Battle until 8th. I'm pretty sure that process of the movement phase was in the game for the entirety of Warhammer after 3rd edition. And it's used here as well. So declare your charges. You don't pre-measure. You make compulsory moves. You make your normal moves. If you fail a charge, you make your charge move. But if you don't reach your target, then you're basically they'll run forward and be like short if they try and do it. Some general rules for like open, difficult, and very difficult terrain. So if it's impassable, making charges. And if you don't make contact with the enemy, you do nothing for the rest of the turn. So if you charge and fail, no shooting. Running, hiding, going over 1-inch obstacles is free. Running, just double your move. You can still go into hiding, and then you get sensed based on people's initiative. Corners is cover, obstacles is cover, choosing a target. Now these rules right here, I think they even use the same diagram from the battle manual. So these were optional rules in the battle manual. They're just full-on rules now in 2nd edition 40K. You can only shoot the closest thing. Characters can ignore that restriction. You can ignore units for vehicles and vehicles for units, or vice versa. And you can ignore things that are in the open for things that are in cover. So you can shoot something more distant if it's in the open to be easier. All your guns can shoot different targets, although there are rules in here for doing fast dice. Taking shots together to speed gameplay up. So typically, and then removing casualties, closest to furthest. So the nearest target's always killed, but you can't pick up models in a squad. And then rules for moving and firing. There's no more move penalty for heavy weapons. It's just if it's move or fire or not. So most heavy weapons can't move or fire unless you have something special that lets you do it, like suspensors, or if you are a model like a bike or a Terminator where your vehicular motion basically allows you to do it. Very similar rules for scattering, although they brought in a new system here. Instead of using a clock face and a D12 for scattering, they now have the scatter and artillery dice, and those give you the random scatter table. It's almost identical to Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So an arrow and a number, the blast moves that direction. The hit and a number, use the arrow and the hit to go that direction. A arrow and a misfire, it's a dud. And a hit and a misfire, you place the blast weapon over the model and then calculate hits as normal. The firing weapon's destroyed. So your missile launcher could explode sometimes, kill the guy carrying it, and kill the rest of the squad around him. It was a legit thing that could happen. Throwing grenades worked as scatter, but your strength would say what your range to your throws were. And then using sustained fire, and the sustained fire dice. So following fire is gone from Rogue Trader. Following fire was where you'd roll to hit, and you could keep rolling to hit until you failed to wound, sorry. Sustained fire is you roll to hit, and then you roll the sustained fire dice. The number of hits that you get, so the number on the dice, you can distribute on the target model and models within 4 inches. And then if you roll a weapon malfunction, if you get a jam, you have to spend the next turn clearing that jam by not shooting. All right, now hand-to-hand, this is identical to the battle manual stuff from 2nd. Uses dice pools opposing. Your weapon skill is your starting total, and then you get to roll a number of d6 equal to your attacks. Pick the highest number. You get +1 to that high number if you have any 6s and additional 6s. So if you get a 6 and another 6 and another 6, you'd be at 8, 6 plus 1 plus 1. And also you give your opponent any 1s you roll as bonuses. So you have crits and fumbles. And your opponent does the same thing. There were certain things like swords would allow you to parry, pick a die on your opponent's pull and re-roll it. And then the total combat score is the number of hits you do differential to your opponent. So what's cool about this system is either side can win. It doesn't matter who's fighting. Your opponent, you are dueling in every combat. It took a little while to resolve, but it meant that basically combat isn't like it is today, where it's just kind of another up-close shooting phase, and there isn't like a clash between two people. Kill Team 2021 actually does the best, I think, currently of doing a duel system where both models fighting kind of feel like they're actually like dueling and striking back and forth and parrying and stuff. But most of the combat systems in Games Workshop games today are more like you go at a certain speed, but you're just shooting up close as opposed to actually like dueling with your opponent. And your weapon skill doesn't really matter, especially in the newer versions of 40K and Age of Sigmar where comparative weapon skills don't work. At least in I think 3rd through probably 7th, comparative weapon skills meant that if your weapon skill was really, really high and you were fighting someone with a lower weapon skill, it became increasingly harder for them to hit you, representing the fact that you're parrying and stuff. Fixed weapon skills mean that your weapon skill doesn't really matter anymore. How good a fighter you are doesn't protect you. It's all offense, no defense. Melee is all gas, no brakes. And then, yeah, you get certain modifiers like being higher up or charging, being encumbered by a heavy weapon, and then you can follow up 2 inches if you killed somebody to try and stay in squad coherency afterwards. You can break if you take too many casualties or you lose combat. You can flee, and then you try and flee towards cover. What was cool though, the game did have insane bravery and craven cowardice. So if you rolled a snake eyes, you would auto pass, and you're so inspired that you get a free round of moving and shooting basically. You get to take a normal turn. And then if you are double 12 or double 6s, if you boxcar your leadership test, you have a craven cowardice, you just basically disappear. You don't run towards cover, the squad just flees and disperses and they're just dead. So there was a chance that morale just killed your squad no matter who they were. Beautiful color section, and you can see here in the current game, they're basically showing off the Rogue Trader miniatures still. So like that's a Rogue Trader Terminator squad and captain. These are all the Rogue Trader Eldar. They are showing off the newer orcs, but Kev Adams kind of stops doing orcs at this point, and we're starting to move into different sculptors. But even the bikes and the Dreadnoughts, Eldar Dreadnought, which became called a Wraith Lord, all your Marines. So the newest models in here actually are the Terminators from the Space Wolf release and the Dark Angel Deathwing. I think they were the last box set for Rogue Trader, but they're the new style Terminators, you can see. So you have even old ones and new ones like next to each other in the art. The Chaos Terminator stayed the same for a long time. They didn't get resculpted for quite some time. There's my captain right there. And then this is a Games Day captain. That was the 99 Games Day captain. No, not 99. That's the 97 Games Day captain, or maybe the 98 Games Day captain. No, probably 97 because he would have come up before. And what's cool about him is he's supposed to be this guy in power armor. So if you look at him, they're the same dude. He's got the same sword and everything, except he's out of his Terminator armor there and he's wearing power armor, which I think is super cool. Cool little throwback. You get your Tyranid Attack, Tyranid Warriors, and Gene Stealer Cult models. You got the Screamer Killer, which is the classic Carnifex. Still, I think, the coolest Carnifex design of all time. And there's Chris's Dreadnought. See, even the Dreadnoughts back then, even though the cardstock Dreadnought had the new art, you had the original classic Dreadnought style still being used. So the new Dreadnought hadn't even come out. You had the Rhino. But if you look at the card that was in this box, the Dreadnought didn't even have art, because they knew they were planning on resculpting it and they didn't want to use the old one. So classic Dreadnought still in the actual rulebook. Same with the Land Speeder. But these are all the newest miniatures here. So these new Grey Hunters in Mark 7 power armor, as opposed to the RTB-01s, and then that new Strike Force squad of Ultramarines. That was the new Tactical Squad box, which is pretty cool. You can see there's Chris's Mega Armor. Oops, wrong page. There's Chris's Mega Armor knob. Because that was Orc Mega Armor back then. It's just basically power armor. And then conversions even in the box, like the Space Orc Goth Brain Crusher, which was an epic thing. Psychology, straight ripped from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, so fear, terror, stupidity, frenzy, and hatred, all exactly the same. So like stupidity, you just stand around eating grass. Frenzy, double your attacks, but you have to charge. Hatred, become leadership 10, you reroll misses in combat, and you have to follow up into your hated squad. And then terror just makes you have to flee immediately. Being heroes, and then there was a rule for commanders and battle standards, just like in Fantasy Battle. If you're within 12 of your commander, you can use his leadership for all your break tests, and the battle standard gives you a morale check reroll. Now it also introduced war gear cards. This was a way of making like a universal war gear table, and the box set came with 12 war gear cards, which we'll use in our first game. Basically your hero level, these were just like magic item cards in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Your level of heroicness gave you access to a certain number of cards. So a regular hero could have, or sorry, a champion could have 1, a hero could have 2, and a mighty hero, or like a Psyker Lord, could have 3. And then basic rules for Psychers. So Psychers, just like in Warhammer with Warhammer Battle Magic, Dark Millennium expanded the War Gear card collection and also the Psychic phase into a deck-driven card game. But in the beginning, your Psychic level basically just gave you access to these generic powers, and they just had a dice roll to go off. So you could do one every Psychic phase, and they kind of jammed in some basic Force Weapon and Psychic power rules. So I actually really like these Psychic powers. Psychic Shield, Teleport, Hellfire, Destroy Mind, Purge Psyker, and Power Vomit, which was Orcs only. But Psychic Shield is just an after save, so it's a 3+ Wound Shrug. Teleport lets you move 46, ignoring all terrain. Hellfire is a 2-inch blast that can shoot 24 inches from the Psyker. Destroy Mind is basically a leadership test against an opposing model, and with the number of wounds you do is the difference in what you... sorry, if the target fails, you just die. You make a leadership test or just die. And then Purge Psyker, it would do the same thing against Psychers, where you take wounds from Psychic feedback if you lose too. And then Power Vomit, which was basically a flamer that came out of an Orc. Force Weapons would add your Psychic level to your Strength. And then rules for vehicles. Now the biggest improvement in 2nd edition from Rogue Trader, most people will agree, is the vehicle rules. Every vehicle got its own data facts that gave you everything you need to know about that vehicle on there. And while it did use some concepts like the turning template to make 45-degree turns and speed rates like slow combat and fast, and like your vehicle type like tracked, that were sort of ripped from Rogue Trader, it didn't take nearly as long to resolve because they all had their own vehicle damage tables and armor tables right there, and you just had to have the cards for what you were using. You could ram stuff and collide with it, which you can't do anymore. And then special rules for shooting. Like if a blast template hit it, the whole of the blast template hit wherever it landed, wherever you placed it. And anything else covered would get hit on a 4, 5, or 6. So like if you put the hole over the hull and over one of the las cannons, on a 4, 5, or 6 it would affect that las cannon as well. Linking weapons, and then rules for hand-to-hand combat with vehicles. Lovely art. The art's so cool. Rules for buildings, going inside buildings, and even armor values and destroying buildings. You could shoot at them and stuff, like a tent. Inflatable structure, armor value 5. Just dies. Shooting and breaking down doors. And then, hey, there's the classic right there. Only insane have strength enough to prosper. Only those who prosper truly judge what's sane, with a beautiful piece of John Blanchard. Love that. And then designer notes about what the thought process was taking the game from Rogue Trader until now. Same synopsis we have on the cards here. And those are the rules. All right, so the remaining stuff. War Gear book. I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but it's basically every weapon in the game at that time, from bone swords to banshee masks, mana blasters, thunder hammers. The thunder hammer, by the way, is hilarious. It doesn't have stats. It just wounds you. So if you get hit with a thunder hammer, you're just wounded. It auto-penetrates vehicles. It's D6 damage and strength 5. They didn't screw around with having stats higher than 10. They just said that over 10, you just died. And it was -5 to your save and D6 damage. Hand flamers, all the different pistols. Bows, crossbows still, because you could still use kind of fantasy style stuff. Flesh borers, a grenade launcher, and a hand bow. Good old hand bow still in there. Gotta have the hand bow. Needle sniper rifles. Storm bolters, las cannons, and then into support weapons like the battle cannon for your Lehman Russ battle tank that didn't have a model at that point. Conversion beam projectors became a support weapon, unfortunately, so my conversion beam squad became plasma cannons. Distort cannons, so D cannons on anti-grav platforms for Eldar. And all my heavy weapons like the Rapier Laser Destroyer, the Mole Mortar, the Tarantula. If it was in Rogue Trader, it's probably in here. The only stuff that's conspicuously absent, you'll find out, is the Orc stuff, although it's named in the Codex. There's a few things that get dropped out by accident. All different grenade types, scare grenades, smoke grenades, tanglefoot grenades, different types of armor. Eldar hollow suits, suppression shields, war gear like Camellia lines. These were the things you got war gear cards for, actually. You got bionics, combi weapons, Camellia line, Frenzon, jump packs, Submagok wings, medipacks, scanners, servo arms, and then special grenades like the Haywire grenade, stasis grenade, toxin grenade, vortex grenade and virus grenade, targeters for your guns, teleporters, teleport homers, and more beautiful colored section. I love these Tin Boys. They actually had, well, you'll see. They're one of the missing things. Those are Orc Tin Boys. There's supposed to be rules for them. There are no rules for them. There's supposed to be a vehicle data fax for them. There's never a vehicle data fax for them. And again, these newer Space Marines from the Space Wolf release and some of the older Rogue Trader era ones. Another good example right here. See, we've got beautiful styrofoam bunker and styrofoam rock spires. This is what I need to make next, I think, is these styrofoam rock spires. So I have some for the next couple games because they're a classic 2nd edition terrain piece. But you have Rogue Trader Dreadnoughts, right? Rogue Trader Terminators, and then Rogue Trader RTB-01 Marines is a Devastator squad. But then you have these, which are Strike Force Marines. They were the in-between, a plastic Marine set that's kind of largely forgotten, but was really good for its time. The only problem with it is they're from the era of no-neck Marines, when Marines' heads were fused to their bodies. And then the Codex Imperialis, I kind of flipped through this before, but I'll give you another brief look. It was the rules and special rules for every single model in the game. So everything from an Inquisitor and the Grey Knights themselves, to the Arbites, Judges and Arbiters. Because you could have a Judge, he's basically a Space Marine captain. The Ministorum, Confessors, the Mechanicus. Wonderful Jessica Goodwin art piece here. Absolutely love that piece of art. Beautiful. Servitors and Electro Priests, the Assassins. There's a picture of an Eversor Assassin before there was an Eversor Assassin. He got sculpted off that beautiful piece of Jessica Goodwin art. Orcs, everything from Snotlings and Run Herds to Gretchen, Pain Boys, Mech Boys, Weird Boys, Mad Boys, and then the Eldar, which had just gotten rules, like the Avatar and stuff had just gotten rules in White Dwarf that had been put in the compendium in the compilation. The Squats, the Ancestor Lords, and the Squat Engineer Guild Masters who could repair vehicles. One of the only models that could actually repair a vehicle back then. And then Chaos. All kinds of cool stuff for demons, like the Bloodthirster. Movement 6, weapon skill, ballistic skills 10. Strength 8, toughness 7, 10 wounds, initiative 8, attacks 10, leadership 10. What does he do? He kills everything. Bloodletters, Juggernauts. And Chaos actually got one of the biggest sections because it had so many models. Rules for Chaos Cultists. How cool is that? Beastmen, Chaos Hounds, Chaos Champions. And then Tyranids, because they were around. They didn't have a ton of unit types, but Gene Stealers, Hybrids, the Patriarch, the Magus. And then at the back here, the last of the Tyranid stuff. Oh, Jesus, it's stuck together. It's been a minute. Yeah, this is the last page. They've been water damaged. Oh, there we go. Tyranid Warriors, Termagants, Carnifex, and Hive Tyrant. So literally 1, 2, 3, 4 unit types, 5 with the Gene Stealers for the whole Tyranid army at the time. That was all that existed. And then beautiful art section still with Ragnar Space Wolves and Gazgul's Orc Warbands. And then more Tyranid Attack. Check it out. We got the original Terminators and Scouts, Mohawk Scouts, still existing at the time. And then Gene Stealer Cultists and Squigs. I have a bunch of these different Gene Stealer Squigs. And then the Codex Army List. This was it. So out of the box, you could play with everything in the game because they gave you army lists for it. There was a general format everyone had to adhere to now. So up to half your army could be characters. You had to have at least 25% of it as squads, but you didn't have to have any characters. And then support could be 50% of your army, which would be vehicles and allies and stuff. The Space Marine Army List. So you had your commander and captains, company standard, apothecary, chaplains, tech marines, librarians, and veteran sergeants. Squad-wise, you could take Terminators, tactical assault and devastator squads, and scout squads. And then support weapons, which were crewed by servitors, and vehicles. And the vehicles were all as data facts. They all said C data facts. Now you got the Rhino, the Dreadnought, and I think maybe the bike in the box set, and that was it. Because they gave you Marines and Orcs in the second edition box set. And then your armor and war gear, you take Terminator armor, Terminator heavy weapons, all kinds of assault weapons, and basically build out your guy however you wanted. The Guard, you had a Colonel, a Commissar, up to 2 Tech Priest Engineers, Engineers at the time. A command section to with a lieutenant to follow people around, and then veteran sergeants. This all come into your character allowance. And then an Imperial Guard Tactical Squad, an Imperial Guard Assault Squad with double las pistols or las pistol and chainsword, a Penal Legion Squad, a Rough Rider Squad, or a Support Squad, which is basically a Devastator Squad. Because Guard Squads were just built like Marine Squads, but just not with Marines, right? So you basically had the same kind of like unit structure. Veterans, Ogrins, Ratlings, and then support weapons and vehicles. Imperial Agents. Now this was a great army list. Now the rule for this one was they weren't army by themselves, but Space Marines and Imperial Guard can spend up to a quarter of their points on Imperial Agents. The points spent count against the support allocation of your army. So you could have Judges and Arbites. You could have Tech Priest Maguses and Engineers. And then you could have Ministorum, the Canonists, the Veteran Sister Superior, Preachers, Confessors, the Ash Telepathica, Psychers, Assassins, Inquisitors. And an Inquisitor Lord was more powerful than a Space Marine Captain. And he was weapon skill plus skill 8, strength toughness 5, 4 wounds, and 4 attacks. Initiative 8 and leadership 10. So like they didn't screw around, man. Heroes were tough. Even like a Canoness, she's weapon skill 6, ballistic skill 7, strength 4, toughness 5, 3 wounds, initiative 7, and leadership 10 with 3 attacks. And this is back when even sister squads, so like a Sororita squad, they were toughness 4 and ballistic skill 4. They were just Space Marines with 1 less strength and 1 less weapon skill, but almost identical otherwise. Grant Terminator squad, one of the most powerful things in the game at the time. Then all your war gear, so you can mix and match. Your squad army list with a Warlord and Battle Standard, Hearthguard command squads. You had Engineer Guildmasters and Ancestor Lord, who was your Psyker, because you could have a squat Psyker basically with his own psychic deck. Then you have your Warrior squads, Attack squads, and Thunder squads, which are your Tactical, Assault, and Devastator squads. Weapon teams, bike squads, heavy weapons, and vehicles. And the vehicles they could take were Land Raiders and Rhinos, and that was it. Now the Orc Army List is pretty much the same as Here We Go. So you could have characters, mobs, freebooters, half the value of your army, and support. War Boss, Battle Standard, Big Boss, Freebooter Captain, Knobs, Bad Moons, Blood Axes. And this is where they started to break stuff up by clan. As opposed to just having an Orc mob, you had clan mobs. Freebooters were Pirates, Flashkits, Wild Boys, and Ogrins. And the Weird Boy Warphead mob. And then your support stuff was Run Herd Artillery and Orc vehicles. And again, there's vehicles in here that never got data faxes, like the Gob Smasher never had a data fax, they never made a model for it. The Knobs Bike, the Tin Boy, everything else got something, I think, though. But then the Run Herd Artillery, Hop Spot Gun, and Squid Catapults had point values. They weren't in the War Gear book, though, we realized later on. Eldar Army List. So you know, Farseers, Avatars, Exarchs. The Avatar, Weapon Skill 10, Strength Toughness 8, 7 wounds, 5 attacks, Initiative 10, Leadership 10. He's automatically your Army Commander. You can take him, he's in charge. The big Burning Man is in charge. And then you had all your squads. Harlequins, Dire Avengers, Fire Dragons, Howling Banshees, Striking Scorpions, Swooping Hawks, Dark Reapers. And you can see here the Harlequins are just better than everybody else. They just had a better stat line than the whole army. Guardians, Close Combat Guardians, Guardian Battle Squad with heavy weapons, and Elder Scouts. Support teams and vehicles. So you had your Dreadnought, your Jet Bike, and your Warwalker. Support weapons are things like heavy plasma guns, scatter laser, las cannon, destroy cannon, all in support weapons. And you didn't need a lot of war gear. And then your Chaos Army, tons of cool stuff in here. Space Marine Commander, Space Marine Hero, Space Marine Champion, Noise Marine Champion with a Sonic Blaster. It's basically a Storm Bolter in this. But anyone who uses Psychic Powers kill them a 4+ if they're within 24 inches of a Noise Marine because of the feedback. Chaos Magus, just regular human. Beastman Champion, Coven Leader. Chaos Terminators and Chaos Space Marine Squads, Noise Marine Squads, Chaos Cultists, Coven, Beastman Pack, Chaos Hounds. And the Chaos Space Marine Squad just covered everything. You just equip them with whatever you wanted, basically. Support then all your demons. Up to half your army could be demons in addition to your support allowance. And you could ally with orcs. And the Tyranid Army List, look at it, it's half a page. Hive Tyrant, Warriors, Termagants, Gene Stealer Brood, and Carnifex. And it could ally with nobody. They never, they had special rules for break tests and psychology. Half your army could be characters, at least a quarter had to be broods. And then Gene Stealer Cultists could ally with Tyranids, and it could have a Patriarch, a Magus, Gene Stealer Broods, Hybrid Broods, Brood Brothers, and vehicles. And that was it. So there you go, look at the core box for Warhammer 40k 2nd edition. You're going to see the game play out today. We're going to use the mission cards. We've played basically the game you're going to see today. If you go and click into the sort of like what's going on today, or if you're in the future, it'll be in the same playlist as this, is going to be between his orcs, or Chris's orcs, and my Flesh Terrors, taken straight out of Rogue Trader into this edition, because we want to show how compatible the game was with the previous basically like releases, and how it kind of rolled over from this cover, which is the Rogue Trader cover, into 2nd edition. So we'll do that for our first game, and the next game we're going to show you some codexes and the codex, the first half of the review for Dark Millennium, which will introduce some new rules and some new scoring and stuff. So big thanks for watching. We'll see you for more Throwback Thursday GMG reviews. Still in a mash. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that video. There are tons of other games already recorded for you to watch. Click over to my channel page if you haven't already, and have a look through the dozens of playlists full of videos. I guarantee you'll discover a game you haven't seen played before. I put out new videos 7 days a week, and every day is themed to a different genre as I continue to explore the wider world of gaming. Of course, none of that's possible without you, the viewer, so click a like and subscribe if you'd like to stay on top of what's happening here daily. My 2 kids and I are massively grateful to be able to have the flexibility of this job so I can always maximize my time with them. If you want to support me continuing to put out this content, it's only possible because of my amazing backers on Patreon who support the studio, equipment, and model cost, as well as being how I make the bulk of my living. You can also help out by buying a t-shirt through Spreadshirt, a measuring gauge or widget from Death Ray Designs, or buying one of my games and supplements like Last Days, Gamma Wolves, and Blaster. As a way of showing my appreciation, patrons get early access to new games and supplements that I write throughout the course of the year. Huge thanks for watching, it really does help out, and happy gaming.